Hello, my name is Zotti, aka Zot.com, and welcome to another episode of In My Podcast Era, the podcast where I chat to all my favorite creators about their eras past, present, and future. I'd like to introduce my next guest. She's an R&B singer, dancer, one hell of a performer, about to tour the country with Sold Out Fest. She's recently dropped her new track, Obsessed, and bitch, I am obsessed. Welcome to the show, Lara Andallo.
Let's go. What's good?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to have you on here.
I'm excited to be here.
As you know, I'm like a big fan. I've been a fan since...
Day one.
The
first key memory I have of you is when you went off on your story about On My Mind.
Yes!
And I remember, oh my God, I loved that. I was like, thank you.
Hearing someone like you from here make something that sounded like that, blew my fucking mind.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah.
It's crazy. That seems to be this constant thing that I get even from when I was 17. Back when I was 17, independently, when I first was getting attention from labels or radio, one of the first stories from an A&R who found me was they Shazammed me on FBI radio thinking I was from America, and they Shazammed it and saw my Triple J on Earth profile, and people always think that I'm not from here. I get comments on TikTok, people being like, oh, you've been from Australia this whole time? I've been listening to you for 5 years. Was Sold Out, for example, people commenting being like, I didn't realize you're from Australia.
Whoa.
I'm like, bitch, I'm right here.
Yes. What era are you currently in?
She's been in solitude. It's not giving us bad bitch, but it's giving bad bitch. A bad bitch would know.
A bad bitch resting.
Off-duty bad bitch,
Off-duty bad bitch. I love that.
Because we're about to go on tour. I'm about to, we just dropped the single. So prior to that, I've just been on my grind and just looking after myself, my family, my mental health. And I think that's what a bad bitch does. So.
Yeah.
I mean, earlier in February, I was working with Troye Sivan, and it was epic to be in the studio with him and Leland, one of his main writers. And Mona was in that session too from Sweden. So super diverse room, and also to be around all queer creatives to just start off with. I've never had that. So that was an amazing experience. But I think that session really cemented and was the start of me realizing that I do have something. So I think with Troye and Leland, it also was a thing of they had so much belief in me too. When we first went into that session, Troye was like, show them head to toe, show them what you want. Firstly, I was like, you listen to my music like that? We're just gonna watch the videos right now. Okay, cool, whatever. True. But it really showed me, I recorded the first verse that we wrote, and straight after that, I remember Leland just being like, whoa, your voice. And I think that that's when it really hit me, backing myself, these people have done, is what it's about. That's such a big thing for me right now. So I learned that from them as well, and how they can just throw themselves into doing something more R&B with me, or wanting to do something more pop leaning. I think that those sessions that Troye set up and that I did with Troye really showed me that I can just go into things and not really have this hold on it has to be R&B. And I think that comes from being independent now too, just having the freedom to just throw paint at a wall and just make music that I want to be making and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Because I think the new music that I've been working on, there's a lot of different things, but it feels like me. The essence feels like me. I'm not so tied to the genre. It's more about if it's expressing what I'm feeling sonically. That's really where I'm at.
Your new single, Obsessed.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about it.
I started this song, it's funny, even with What You Want, I always write some of my favorite songs before I go to an airport.
Whoa.
So I wrote this one just before I was going to the airport in LA to come back home. And then it was a rush to get it done before I went to the airport. He was like, just do one more layer, one more vocal, until my Uber came. And then I was like, okay, it's time to dip. I mean, I'm not a producer. I used to produce myself early days, GarageBand and all of that. But I'm definitely very involved in terms of the drum patterns, the sound selection. I think being a dancer as well, it has such an impact on how I hear music. And after I made my first project for her when I was a teenager, after that and performing that, I realized, okay, I approach music now from how is it going to translate live and how will I want to perform it. So I think that is a big key for me, yeah.
Who inspired you to do what you're doing now?
As in artists?
Yeah.
Definitely Kehlani, definitely Tinashe, Ciara, Janet Jackson. But as a first, Kehlani for sure. Yeah. Honestly, it was the first artist that I gravitated towards in terms of like knowing R&B was the music that I liked until I heard Kehlani's music and I was like, oh, it's R&B. It's R&B that I love. And then when I looked into her a bit more, she was the first artist that I had come across at the time, let's say like 2013, 14, that was like openly just being like, yeah, I'm bi. At the time she was, but I had never heard that. And at the time when I was kind of, questioning myself, just hearing that, she didn't even like vocally like do anything, I don't think, in media or like Pride things that I saw, but just hearing her say that in interviews made me just straight away gravitate. Yeah. I think that came from, being a teenager and being closeted or like being forced to be closeted and not being comfortable in that. It's pretty heavy. Like, as much as we like to see the outside of that and like coming out of it and being proud after it, there's a lot of heaviness that you carry for like years to come.
And I think a lot of people look at the queer experience and like, okay, marriage is legalized, there's XYZ, but like when you're in spaces like where we are like to party and stuff, like I've been on the dance floor like dancing with a guy at like, an R&B or like hip hop night and stuff, and it's only accepted to a degree.
Oh my God. Yeah, I think I have the opposite end of that spectrum of like, me being more feminine presenting and being into women who are more feminine presenting and not being taken seriously or just being sexualized or
fetishized by straight dude. Yeah.
Or just not respecting those boundaries because of how I present myself. So I totally feel that. There's so much beauty in like queer love. There is, because it's like you have to get to that point where it feels so real that you're willing to like
be vulnerable,
deal with all the repercussions or all the things that come with it. Whereas, I feel like in high school when you're straight, you can just be like, oh, I like him. And then just like, and not really, but like, oh, it's cute, this is fun.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do that. Like, you couldn't do that when we were in high school. Like, no way.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of things that come with that.
Yeah, there was, well, I was out in high school.
Oh, slay.
Yeah.
Slay.
I was like, I don't give a fuck. I was like, well, I was like kind of forced out because like,
oh, not that.
It was funny. This girl wanted to be my girlfriend and like kept getting upset. Like, wouldn't hold her hand and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God. And then all the girls started being haters. And then I was like, I'm gay, duh. But it did come with like a lot of challenges. But this is in my podcast era, not in my trauma era.
Literally.
Yeah. But I'm glad things are better now. Did
That's
you always
so
want to pursue what you're doing now as a career?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so from 3 years old, I started playing violin. So I was like I was an instrumentalist before I sang. So I played violin, saxophone, drums, guitar, and piano.
Whoa.
And then from there, like from those instruments, that's when I started writing on guitar and piano. But I always knew I wanted to do this. It was more like how. Because when I was younger, I wanted to do it, but then I shied away from it because this is far. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't really reach being a recording artist or a songwriter. And then I spent my time training full-time in dance, but then that's when I realized what kind of music that I liked making. You know what I mean? Because I was singing musical theatre, I was training in musical theatre, but like, obviously my runs don't really work in that space. The main one for me was definitely getting surgeries on my ankles. As a dancer, I was doing it full-time, and then to be doing 50 hours of dancing to being in a wheelchair is a very big difference. And it obviously was a blessing in disguise in terms of being able to spend more time on music. But at the time, of course, it's like, what's the universe doing to me? I was 15 when I had my first round, and then I had them again when I was 17. So going through that process twice, it really changes your perspective, especially as a teenager even, on just like how mobile we are, like, and as a dancer, I depend on my movements. So that was a big shift for me, but it also was a shift in terms of career because I had all that time away from music and I was from dance, and I was homeschooled at the time. So I had all this extra time to be making music. And that's when it really changed, because I had the time to make music. And without that, I literally wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. So that's what really taught me that everything happens for a reason. I already believed in that, but like, that's like proof.
It does.
From starting and doing R&B here when I was a teenager, there wasn't as much access to, people weren't really producing R&B, people weren't writing R&B. you had to learn how to be resourceful, and that's why I did everything myself. Really, like, that's why I was writing, that's why I was recording myself, like, you know, because you have to learn how to be resourceful. And same with this year for me, like, in my era.
Yes.
Like, I think has been really trusting that, you know, when those doors close, that's really for your own benefit. It really is. You just have to wait it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wait is so painful sometimes.
It is painful, but I think all we have control over is the action that we take daily. So I try to focus on that.
That's true. That's some good advice. What habits or routine do you think have heavily contributed to your success?
I think it's honestly not being afraid to just keep trying things every day. Like, and not letting those, the bad song or the bad video or whatever it is stop you from creating more. People knew how much music I made before, like, the songs that people actually do know, that I have pulled from the internet now. Because I heard this quote that Ed Sheeran said in an interview like years ago, and it stuck with me. He was saying, like, you know, if you have a water faucet and there's shit water in it, the only way to get to the clean water is to get get the shit out. So it's like, how are you going to get to good stuff if you're not even going to let the bad stuff come out?
Yeah.
So I think it's the consistency of that.
Yeah.
And removing that pressure off yourself for everything to be like A1 straight away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that. And I think it's like so weird that we have this expectation for like creators to come out the gate swinging with like a final product. But like the same time, like you look at trades and people go to university, people study, like you go to coffee school, you can't expect to like do the perfect latte art straight away, you know? It's delusional. I mean, sometimes it's good to be delusional.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we're all delusional in this industry though.
Yeah. What's a book, podcast, or piece of art that you found profoundly impacted your career?
I don't think a lot of people know about this book, but it's called There's No Plan B for Your A Game. And it's by Bo Eason. And he was like a NFL player in like the Super Bowl, but then went on to be like write his own one-man show on Broadway. And and it was like, I can't remember the actual credentials of it, but like New York critically acclaimed kind of thing. From no acting experience, no writing experience. And I loved reading that book. It's a very different and strong perspective in terms of like his whole philosophy, I guess, is like you want to be the best at what you do, and that means a 20-year, like a long-term plan. So it's about working in long-term plans. And he spoke about when he was like 5 or something, knowing that he wanted to be in the Super Bowl, but he couldn't even play at the time, but he drew it out, and he still has that photo of what that looks like to him, just visualizing that every day. So long timelines are like my shit. Like, I'm like, okay, in 10 years, then I can, you know, like that's how I be really thinking. So like, even with how I move in this industry, it's like, it's all about longevity.
And you also still look 50s. I'm sure in 10 years' time, people will be like, oh, wow, who's this like young artist? And you're like, I'm 30.
My mom told me about, like, do you know The Secret? Like, the Law of Attraction.
Yeah.
She told me about that. We watched that movie when I was 8, and I just believed it.
Wow.
So I've been, like, doing my vision board and, like, manifestation since I was 8. And I just fed into the Delulu at the time because you're not jaded as a kid too. Yeah. So I believed it so heavily. Like, I didn't even question it. Like, I feel like if I found out about it later, I probably would have, like, as a teenager. But I just didn't question it at all at 8. Wow. And I just kept living like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
So also The Secret. Yeah. I think for me personally, something that I've definitely learned in, like, my early 20s is like when I was a teenager and just a kid, I grinded so hard. Like, I still do, but like it was so like this, and like being homeschooled, dancing. I didn't have like time off really, and then going straight into music. I felt like I just had to constantly be on go. You can't be creative and fuel your creativity without living. They go hand in hand, and rest. I'm so bad at that, but I'm working on it. I'm aware, you know, because I had a big like writer's block in 2019, 2020, before COVID happened. And I felt like that was because I was just so focused on on what I needed to do, but like I wasn't living outside of that. So then I would have all these melodies, I would have all these ideas, but then the lyrics, I was like struggling. Even though I had things to write about from the past, like there was nothing fresh that was like screaming at me. And you need that. You need the change of environment. You need the change of perspective. You need those things to fuel yourself as a creative.
How do you want to see the industry here evolve?
In Australia? That's a big question.
It is a big question.
That is a big ass question. I think within R&B, I think we are collectively supporting female POC artists a bit more, but not nearly enough.
No.
Like, I feel a bit about saying that, but it's true.
It's true. It really is true.
And I feel like we need to have more of that support for our own. I think Australia just has this it's tall poppy syndrome. Like, I feel like Australia has that. I think Leroy is a perfect example of that. And I think if we don't change that, that same thing is just going to keep happening.
Yeah.
So I feel like in terms of change, it's like changing the perspective, changing like Australians needing to get approval from outside to then be validated by people on home soil.
Yeah. It's just about creating those spaces. But I even found when like Cater first popped off. Right?
Yeah.
So shout out to Cater. I love what they're doing out there.
We love Cater.
But when it first started, I reached out and I was like, I know there's a lot of queer artists in Australia in R&B, rap, hip hop, like almost all like the music guests I've had on this.
Yeah,
I've been
right.
here to a degree.
We love.
And even internationally, there's a lot of queer R&B artists who don't really, and hip hop and rap and pop that don't really get to talk about their experiences and the things they enjoy because it's always addressed to like a mainstream audience. So like I reached out to them and I was like, I want to do a show called Gaydar on Cater.
Oh my God, that's fire.
Yeah. But this is the sad thing about this industry. And even when, during my time at BuzzFeed, when I was like pitching ideas to the sales team, it's always the same thing. Like the Australian industry is not like there yet. Like the people in power aren't there yet. And it's really sad.
Well, it's like me, like with releasing the music I was releasing in 2018, 2019. I think Australia wasn't nearly as ready as they are now for those records or who I was, you know, especially me specifically being Asian or Filipino as well. Whereas when I went to the US, like I was so surprised by how many Filipinos and Asian creatives there were, like really making moves. Like that was such an inspiring thing for me personally to see when I was over there and I did this AAPI writing camp. And again, same thing with the Troye Sivan thing being my first fully queer session, and then to being in the US and having my first session of all Asian creatives. It's really cool to feel like there are those spaces for me, like whereas I didn't really feel that as much here. Yeah.
Let's like be honest with it. Do you reckon it's going to start happening here? Can you see it? Because everyone's
That's
always
the
like,
tea?
yeah, because everyone's like, yeah, overseas, and I'm like, is that like is that the only way forward for like Australian artists?
I'd love for it to change. I mean, again, another example to me is Grant Perez. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, and like I'm pretty sure he was from Western Sydney.
Wow.
He's a Asian artist, but like I've hardly heard like in the scene like much of him from the scene. You know what I mean? But he's got millions of streams, touring globally, and it's like, where's the hype here for an artist from Western Sydney? Like, I don't know. Like, it's just interesting for me, like, as a fellow, like, Asian artist.
I hope it changes.
So I hope it changes. Like, yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I feel like one of the big ones that we haven't really touched on is Blast. You toured with him?
Yeah. I found out about that tour, like, 24 hours before.
Whoa!
Yeah, low key. But yeah, we did that tour. It was Australia, New Zealand. Also, shout out to Auckland because like Auckland is so fire. The reception out there is crazy. But doing that tour with his team, they were so amazing. And that was the first team from kind of the US that I really felt like really backed me. And going over to the US and to LA and having their support and going in the studio with Blast and linking with like his producers as well for some of my new music has been a blessing, and I love their team. And yeah.
On collaborators, I don't want to say realistically. I want you to like hit the sky, but I hate when people answer like Beyonce.
Yeah.
Like Beyonce's busy. She's
She's been busy.
Yeah. But who can you see yourself, or who would you like to collaborate in the near future with?
In the near future, like
that you haven't already started, because I know there's collaborations happening behind the doors.
like features.
Yeah.
People always ask me this, but I feel like I'm it depends on the song. Because to me, like, there's so many artists that like I just love, but is the song right for them? And I don't feel like the whole I'm gonna write a song and then I want this person, like aiming for it to be with someone. But I guess right now, someone that would be fire to collaborate one day with would definitely be Timbaland.
Wow.
And you know what's crazy is because I get people commenting on my TikToks being like, you need to work with Timbaland.
Whoa.
I'm like, bitch, do you think I wouldn't want to?
Yeah.
So that would be fire.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I would, because his sounds are so opposite to the production on your...
You reckon?
I reckon similar in terms of like patterns.
Yeah.
But it's like really like low, like...
Oh, right. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
And you're very like trillion, like up here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a music...
No, I hear you.
I don't have music.
Yeah.
I didn't study music. And I think that fusion could be so sick.
Yeah. That would be fire.
Damn. If you could advise someone who was starting out and trying to break into this industry, what piece of advice would you impart on them?
Ooh, there is a lot. But I think the main thing that I would have wanted to hear when I was starting and when I was a teenager is really trusting your gut, because I think when you're young in this industry as well and starting out, you don't have the prior knowledge or the prior backing for yourself to be able to trust your gut, if that makes sense. Like, there were gut feelings that I felt at the start when I was talking to certain people or, you know, wanting to start working with certain people. I had a gut feeling, but because you don't have any knowledge to back that up as a young creative or a young person, you're like, oh, but what do I know? I wish that I listened to myself a bit more, because you always know. You really always know, and I'm learning that, and it's okay that I wasn't as in tune with it back then, because now I know, and that's a learning process. But that's definitely something that I would advise. Yeah.
On that note as well, like, how do you think you navigate between like that gut feeling, your intuition, and anxiety?
Ooh. Anxiety gang. Yeah, that's a big one, actually. That is something that I feel like I'm still working through, because, you know, even going to events or all these things, like, it's really anxiety inducing. I feel like you'd feel the same way, right? Like, there's those thoughts that come in when you're at those events and you don't know how to decipher what's like, is this my gut telling me that this person is off, or am I just off? I think it just comes from, like, you really need to ground yourself when you are trusting your gut. I don't like to jump the gun when it comes to my gut, in terms of, like, I like to just self-assess and, like, before I do make decisions. But I'm not going to lie, like, I still struggle with that. I still struggle to decipher that as someone that has anxiety. I still don't know sometimes, like, if that's my honest answer.
Besides, like, journaling, like, what do you do to figure that out?
I go to a psychologist.
Yeah.
And a therapist.
Yeah.
So I definitely look after my mental health. I've got a few things going on in my personal life and family, so that's definitely something that I've prioritized, and definitely good friends. Oh my God, I don't know what I would do without my girls.
Yeah.
And, like, also my main producers, Hugh Lake and Sid, like, I be talking so much shit in my sessions, like, just my life, you know?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've cried to those boys about so many different things. But I think something that I've learned this year in terms of, like, dealing with anxiety and just being vulnerable, it's such a hard thing. And I've learned to really, like, lean on people, because I'm not that kind of person. I find it really hard to ask for help or accept help. So this year has been a big one of allowing myself to be vulnerable with people and take the help. Like, that's been a massive help with anxiety, for example, because you can be more open about it with people, including yourself, like, low-key, like, the people know. But, like, there was one time that I was having anxiety at an event, and, like, you were right there. You already know.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you for that.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for watching this episode. And if you like it, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Peace.